Welcome to Back to My Garden. Discover your passion for gardening. Here's Dave Ledoux.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world when you listen to this. I'm Dave Ledoux, and welcome to another episode of Back to My Garden. And today we have a great guest. We're going to the west coast of America. Alex loves gardening and embraces it for its artistic and therapeutic values. She's an active garden blogger, sharing tips on her blog at peaceloveandgardening.com, as diverse as worm beds, composting, edibles, and rock gardens. She's gardened on both coasts and calls Huntington Beach, California home. Please welcome to the show, Alex Anderson. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Dave. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
We have a lot to talk about. I gave you a brief introduction. I want to get to know you better, and our listeners want to hear your stories, Alex. Take a minute or two and relax and share with us a little bit about your background and how did you get into gardening?
Sure. I actually grew up gardening. I grew up here in Orange County in Southern California, and we grew up with a big backyard, and we're about just a few miles inland from the beach, a coastal garden, if you will. And, my parents, we gardened. We had apricot trees, peach trees. We grew vegetables and sweet peas. And I just have really good, fond memories growing up gardening out there with my mom and dad. But I really got into serious gardening, I guess, if you would say, later in life. I had moved to New York City for my career and then ended up moving back down to Atlanta, Georgia. And this was right before 9/11. I had just left New York before 9/11 happened. And in the South, I really discovered gardening life in the South. Atlanta has an amazing gardening community, and I just immersed myself in anything I could with gardening. I attended every garden lecture I could and classes, went on tours. I spent a lot of time at the Atlanta Botanical Garden, which is amazing. If anyone's never been there, visit it. And I spent every moment I had just educating myself about gardening. I met, there's garden legends in the South, from Alan Armitage to Michael Durr. And also at this time, it was a really hard time in my life. I was going through some difficult things. My younger brother was diagnosed with terminal cancer back here in California. We were really close. And so that was a hard thing to deal with. And then 9/11 happened. And, of course, that shook everybody's world up. So I just felt like everything was in a tailspin, and gardening was just my therapy. It saved me, being so far away from my family when my brother was sick and everything going on in the world. It was the only thing that really soothed my soul. And I didn't really know a lot of people in Atlanta since I was new there, so the gardening community really became my family down there. I met some, key people, as I mentioned, and actually a particular flower I fell in love with is the hydrangea. And if you're familiar in the South, they're blues and purples down there because of their soil, and they're gorgeous. So I joined the American Hydrangea Society, and a woman named Tara Dillard was actually the president of the American Hydrangea Society down there. She's a garden designer, and they kind of talked me into joining the group there. I started doing their newsletter, and she actually started the first garden blog I'd ever heard of, and Tara Dillard, so you should look up her blog. She's amazing. That was 15 years ago. And so I started hanging out with this group of hydrangea gardeners. There was about 400 people that belonged to the group, and I guess they kind of saw me as this young, eager person, willing to come in and work hard for them. And the founder of the American Hydrangea Society was a woman named Penny McHenry, and I just fell in love with her. She was a feisty, kind of passionate, force to be reckoned with woman, and she was an avid hydrangea gardener. I think her house was 4 to 5 acres in Atlanta, and she started the American Hydrangea Society. And I joined the group and spent a lot of time with her. And unfortunately, Penny's passed now. But I remember her always when I'm gardening. And so that's really, that was kind of the birth of gardening for me. Going through this hard time, I was flying back and forth from Atlanta to California, visiting my brother. And while I was visiting him at my home that we grew up in here in California, I'd spend time in the backyard with my mom and dad, and we decided to plant a rose garden in the backyard when he was sick. And so my dad and I were out there digging up the lawn, and we placed this beautiful fountain in the center. And my mom, chose the roses that she wanted to be in that garden, and it was just really a meaningful time for my family and I to spend those last few months with my brother gardening. And that was really, I think, it just saved my soul. And moving forward from Atlanta, I'm thankful for my time there, but I'm really happy to be back here in Southern California gardening. This is quite a bit different.
I bet.
Yeah.
I can imagine the two climates, even though they're both hot, are very different.
Yeah, in Atlanta, it is, the summers are 90 degrees with 100% humidity, and it rains all summer there. And, here in California, it's more a Mediterranean climate where I always say it's pretty much 70 degrees and sunny pretty much every day here in California. It's almost kind of boring. But back in Atlanta, that's when I knew that this was my passion in life, because it could be completely humid and wet and stifling hot. I'd be, in my gardening clothes, pants and long sleeves because of the mosquitoes, and it could be just miserably hot, and I would be out there digging all day in the garden. Nothing stopped me. But yeah, it's different. I miss the gardens back there. Lots of hostas, and the azaleas there are amazing, and so many different things. And here, coming back home, it was quite a shift. And some of the things that did well there don't do so well here. So you kind of shift into a new direction. But I do make sure I have plenty of hydrangeas in my backyard here.
Let me encourage the listeners, don't try to take notes. I'm going to do all the resources and links up on the blog that Alex shares at BackToMyGarden.com. Make sure you follow Alex and read her blog. It's brilliant. It's up at www.peaceloveandgardening.com. You can also connect with Alex on social media, on Twitter, at PeaceLoveGarden. Now, love is spelled L-U-V because Twitter has a short handle, so it's PeaceLoveGarden. And if you have questions on hydrangeas, you now have an expert in your midst. Maybe we could start there, Alex.
Yeah.
With all your exposure and experience around these absolute talent growing hydrangeas, do you have like a bag of tricks with maybe one or two tips? Because I know some friends, their hydrangeas are dead. They die all the time. It's one of their disaster stories. Do you have some secret tips that make your hydrangeas grow so good?
I don't even know. They're not really secret tips, but I feel like they're the easiest flower you could ever grow. And in here, in California, it's funny because when I tell people that, I was part of the Hydrangea Society and how easy they are, people are like, oh, mine are dying. What do you do? Honestly, they just, you want them at my house here in down by the beach in Orange County. I have them on the east side of my house. So the east side of my house here is pretty shaded, but there's some dappled afternoon sun. In Atlanta, they would always say, morning sun, afternoon shade, because it's so unbearably hot there in the summertime. But they do need some sun, definitely loamy, rich soil, well-drained soil. Obviously more acidic soil will make your hydrangeas more blue and purple, and more alkaline will make them pink. So in the south, they're mostly blues. In California here, they're mostly pinks. I'm always trying to keep mine blue because I prefer the blue. So I'm always adding aluminum sulfate to my soil here. But I compost a lot. I throw my coffee grounds in the ground a lot. I don't trim them back. If I do cut them back at all, I wait until they're dormant. I would say even, January, February, and just clip off some of the dead blooms. They're not the most beautiful plants in the wintertime, but if you're patient, I'm already getting some, spring growth on mine right now. And they bloom beautifully, usually end of May to mid-January, a little sooner in the south. But and really, it's just, really good, rich soil is important, and just leave them alone, and they're fine. They're really easy.
That's brilliant stuff. I mean, what you just shared there in 2 minutes, you could Google all day and not find all that wisdom. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I think, give you way too much, how you should trim them and clip them. And you know what? I just don't think about it too much. I just do what I feel is the best thing to do for them. And I talk to them. I'm not going to lie. I do talk to my plants. My hydrangeas, I have a whole row of them on the side of my house, and they do wonderfully on the side. And a funny story is actually a blog about it, that my husband, they're in the pathway on the one side of my house, and they've gotten so big they kind of block. The blooms are so big in the summertime, they kind of block the pathway for my husband to walk through, and he gets a little irritated. So I agreed this fall, when they were done blooming, to move them back a little bit, trim them up and move them back a little bit so they're not in the way. So let's hope that they do okay. But I had just moved them back, a month or so ago, and they're still flushing out with their leaves. So they're really hardy. They're really hardy plants, and I encourage anybody to grow them. You can go to American Hydrangea Society's website. There's information on there. And if anybody's ever interested, I'd love to start a hydrangea society here in Southern California. If anybody's interested, contact me.
Outstanding. When you're around your friends and family, do they treat you like a gardening professor? Like, do they bring you their questions and problems?
They do. I think I always have clarified to everybody, I'm not a professional, but I guess I kind of have a green thumb. But my belief is everybody can have a green thumb. It's not people just say, oh, I don't know what to do. It's like, it's kind of instinct, I think, with your plants. And, but yeah, I do get a lot of questions, and I don't know everything, but I think, have enough experience I can help people. So yeah, many times I do get friends that have me come over and help them start a vegetable garden, or maybe redo their front garden bed and just give them some tips. And I love to give as gifts to friends. I call them green gifts. So I give a lot of seeds or plants or herbs and things like that, just to kind of encourage people to start their own gardens. I think I kind of feel like, not to label myself, but I like to say that I'm kind of a garden inspirational speaker or advocate, or whatever you want to say, because I like to inspire people to garden, and that's another purpose, I think, of my blog, is just, I think anybody can do it, and it's well worth it. It helps, it does so many wonderful things for people, so.
Let's mention your blog again, because a lot of listeners are driving. It's www.peaceloveandgardening.com. Alex, I wanted to ask you, the listeners are always curious about, when I bring on guests, what their own personal gardens are like. What do you love growing? What did you grow last year? What kind of season did you have?
I love growing everything. My garden is very diverse. I like everything. So from every style to different plants and flowers and succulents. So I kind of, I just do what I think, what I feel like doing. So I have, like I said, I have one whole side of my house that's hydrangeas. One part of that side of the house is full sun. So I have a lot of California natives there, sage and lavenders and all these things. And then, I have one part that's my vegetable garden that we have a really fun time doing with my son. I have a 2.5-year-old, and he's out there with me digging and pulling up the worms and sometimes pulling out the vegetables before they're ready, but that's okay. And then I have herbs growing in pots on one of my tables out there. I've got tons of woolly pockets on the walls. We have palm trees, you name it. So it's a mix. And, I like to, I like to experiment too. So That's what I usually do with a lot of different seeds and vegetables and annual things that we grow. But I think, and then one of the reasons, going back to my garden, is one of the reasons we did buy the house was because there was already 2 orange trees, a lemon tree, avocado, and a grapefruit tree in the backyard. And here in Southern California, we don't have huge backyards or garden space. Our property here doesn't allow for that. So, but the fact that this house and this backyard had all those trees, sold me on the house already. So we're fortunate enough to already have those built in. So I've just added my touches around the garden. I do have a lot of succulents. Of course, they're so easy to grow, and you just stick them in the ground and they flourish here. They do great here.
Alex, I live thousands of miles from you, but every time the TV came on, they talked about the drought in California. Did it change your gardening at all? How was it for you last year?
It did, and I did want to talk about that. We had, we're in a severe drought. We've had a little bit of rain this last month or so, but it hasn't made a dent, really. We're in a severe drought here. It does change our gardening. I'm really careful about how we use water. We have a sprinkler system, but, we shut that down or maybe let it run once a week. I'm really careful about, reusing a lot of water in the house, bringing it outside. If I boil eggs, for example, I use that water to go out and water my plants with it. I'm almost a little crazy about the water thing because it's so precious to us. And, it's really scary here. This summer was extremely hot. The part of lawn that we do have in the backyard was burned to a crisp. And we just let it go because I figured, eventually I'd like to do all California natives there, have a California-friendly garden, take out our lawns eventually. I have to talk my husband into that one. We lost a lot of plants, and I guess I had to resuscitate a lot of plants as well the last few months. So it's taken a toll. California natives are definitely a great way to go, but which we do have them, but hydrangeas and all these other things that I love, I do keep them in the garden as well. So it's taken a toll here. You can see it, just around town, and everything's pretty dry. But we're hoping we get some more rain, which we have had the last month or so, which is great.
Are your hydrangeas pollinator friendly? Did the bees seem to love them?
You know what? The bees do not. I have not noticed any bees on my hydrangeas here. I do have a lot of lavender and rosemary, which are blooming right now beautifully, and they sit in the sun. They have gotten huge, and I have a ton of bees on my rosemary blooms and my lavender. So I feel pretty good about that because, bees are another concern as well.
You made me smile because I have 2 feet of snow on the ground, and there's obviously nothing moving outside, and you have bees and things in bloom. The only thing that is ever around in February in Canada is on the sunny side of the house when it warms up. The ladybugs, the ladybugs come to life in the windows.
Oh,
yeah, it's the strangest thing.
That's another thing to consider when you're gardening here in our climate. It's sunny year round, so it does get a little bit cooler in the wintertime. I'd say maybe in the 60s or something. So, things grow here year round pretty much. So when you're planting, that's always a thing to keep in mind here in California is, things grow fast because it's, in Southern California especially, it's sunny year round. So you have to take that into consideration.
Very good. I glanced, Alex, at the clock, and our time is flying by. Now's the time in the show where we play a game called 5 Quick Questions.
Okay.
This is your chance to share your wisdom and experience with novice beginner gardeners. Are you ready to play? Okay.
I'm ready.
Oh, and I changed them up, so stay nimble.
Okay.
Question number 1. What's the funniest, most unusual, or most outrageous mistake that you've ever made in the garden that you're willing to admit to in public?
Well, I don't know about outrageous, but I did have, when I moved back here to California, I really got into California natives, and I had a strip of dirt on the side of my house that is in the baking sun, and I planted these little tiny California natives. And I'd say within 2 years, they were exploding and completely took over the side of my house. And unfortunately, we had to take them out, which broke my heart because they were beautiful and they smelled amazing. The stage was amazing. And my husband and I were just married at the time, and he really did question my gardening skills because I was bragging that I was such an amazing gardener and I loved it so much. And we were scratching our heads on that one. So that was kind of my first big oops, moving back to California and realizing everything grows here so quickly and so big. So
wow, that was...
Spacing is important.
That was not what I expected in the first half of that story. I thought you had said you'd barbecued them, but I guess they do. Everything, some plants love heat and sun.
Yes.
Outstanding. Yeah. Good. That's exactly what I was looking for. Question number 2. If you were only allowed to grow one plant next season, what plant would you personally just have to grow?
A new plant, or could it be a hydrangea?
Well, I was going to say it has to be hydrangeas. Yeah, the minute the words left my mouth, I said, "Oh, you've already answered that one."
Yes, I love hydrangeas, and wherever I live or any time in my life, I have to have hydrangeas in my life.
I have to tell you, that was one of my big ahas today talking to you, is the way you can not control, but the color choices. You can influence, and that's a tremendous aspect of gardening, isn't it?
It is, and not all hydrangeas. There's different varieties and cultivars, and not all of them can be changed. But the general hydrangea macrophylla, the big mop head hydrangeas, can be influenced by your acidity in your soil. So that's, something to think about. So here, like I said, they're mostly pink here, but I prefer the blues, as I had back in Atlanta. So I'm always trying to, I've even changed on one plant. I've had big mop head blooms where half the bloom is pink and half the bloom is purple. As you can see, it was trying to change by me changing the acidity in the soil. You can see that on my blog. The picture of that one. So it's fun.
That's a perfect lead into question 3 is everyone should follow your blog and share it at peaceloveandgardening.com. Question 3 is, do you have one or two favorite gardening websites that you like to share?
Gosh, I do. I follow bloggers, actually. Mm-hmm. So, Tara Dillard, as I mentioned, I believe hers is, I want to say it's taradillard.com. And as I mentioned, she is one of the first bloggers I've ever heard of. And she is a garden designer in the South and was a mentor to me back there. We're still in touch occasionally. So taradillard.com, I would say, is probably my number one choice.
I'll also put a link up to the American Hydrangea Society.
Absolutely, please. And if if anybody's ever in the South, definitely go to their website and see. In June, they always have a huge garden tour that's absolutely amazing, and the Penny McHenry Hydrangea Festival goes on in June as well. So
nice. Question 4. Do you have a favorite gardening book that you could recommend?
Gosh, okay, I think, I really, Michael Durr has a great book on hydrangeas. Again, okay. I mean, I do garden other things. I know I'm talking a lot hydrangeas. I would say Michael Durr's book, DIRR, has a great, wonderful book about hydrangeas that I've kind of used as my Bible in getting to know hydrangeas, how to grow them, and the different varieties. So that is one of my recommendations. And then the Good Old Garden book by Pat Walsh and she wrote Southern California Organic Gardening book. It's kind of the garden Bible here if you live in Southern California. So I refer to that one. There's a month by month, gardening in that, very, very detailed, and she has a lot of experience.
You know, Alex, we have listeners in like 62 countries, which is crazy. It's just spreading. Now, a lot of them live in cities with little balcony and patio gardens. Mm-hmm. If somebody wanted to grow their first hydrangea next season, can you just give them a little wisdom, like a tip on some things to consider?
Well, and that's the great thing about hydrangeas is they grow wonderfully in pots. And, if you give them enough good, rich soil, you can definitely grow them in pots. So it's not a plant that needs to be in the ground. And so I would say, you can pick up a hydrangea anywhere. And, they're, in any nursery, of course. But honestly, at Trader Joe's or even sometimes a supermarket, you might not know the variety or cultivar that you're buying. But they're, they have them in bloom all the time, available to sell. You can find out, if you buy it that way, you know what color you're getting, and start it in a pot. And if you give it enough, like I said, enough good loamy soil and, keep the soil well drained and moist, they'll do wonderfully in pots. Good companion plants with hydrangeas or clematis or azaleas, anything else acidic as well. So really easy. I encourage anyone to try it.
Oh, excellent tips. Question 5 is a fun one. Is there anything you've never grown before that you would love to experiment with in the garden?
Let's see. I would love to do an espalier of some kind of fruit, whether it's apples or whatever. And I do have the wall for it. I just haven't, I haven't ventured out and tried it yet, but an espalier of one of some kind of fruit or berry even. I'd love to love to experiment with that.
If you're into exotic berries, I just grew one last season for the first time called a haskap. It's Haskap. And it's from a bog, like a swamp in Russia, in Siberia. And it was called the swamp honeysuckle, and nobody would buy it when it was called the swamp honeysuckle. So they changed the name to haskap. And it's shaped like if you squeezed off the tip of your pinky finger, like it's a long, oval-shaped purple-red fruit.
Mm.
And it's so unique. There's an orchard in Canada where they're making wine from it.
Ooh, what does it taste like?
It tastes like a distant cousin of the blueberry.
Mm.
And so that's kind of my...
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, that's one of those things. My wife went to the local garden center and came home with an armful of, hey, what's that? And she just picked... Yeah, so you never know. You can find some treasures if you look around.
Absolutely.
Well, our time is flying by. I want to encourage the listeners to connect with you on Twitter at Peace Love Garden. That's PeaceLuvGarden. And if you have hydrangea questions or if you want to join the newly formed Southern California Hydrangea Society when it starts, reach out to Alex on Twitter and definitely share her blog on social media. That's peaceloveandgardening.com. How have you enjoyed blogging? What's that been like for you?
You know what? That has been amazing. I made that choice. I work full time. I have a 2-year-old, and we're busy with life. And so I felt like I needed another outlet for to kind of express myself in gardening, because I feel like gardening, it's an art and it's a form of expression for me. And so my time's limited in the garden, but I felt like I needed another outlet as well. And I just decided to do it just about a year ago, and I love it. My mom's a writer and a gardener as well. And so I started writing and just coming up with some ideas. And I got to tell you, I am addicted to it. If I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning before my son and my family's up to do it, I do when it's dark, or stay up late at night, or any chance I get. And it's opened up this whole new world for me. And meeting people like you, Dave, and just connecting, it's crazy how you can connect with people around the world about what you're doing through your social media. And I'm definitely a people person, and just connecting with people is so great. And I just feel like it's kind of given me a voice about gardening. And like I said, kind of hopefully I'm inspiring people to garden, and that's my goal. That's one of my goals for Peace, Love, and Gardening, is just to inspire people. So I'm just absolutely in love with it.
You're a brilliant writer, Alex, and who knows, the elves over at Timber Press, they listen to this podcast, so who knows, you may get a book deal, a hydrangea book deal.
Thank you.
You never know. That's the thing, is you're creating art. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Alex, we're nearly out of time. You've been an excellent guest. I want to invite you to have the last word to the listeners today. Can you reach out to them through cyberspace and leave them either with a note of encouragement or a pearl of wisdom?
You know what? Yeah, I will say that I think one of the best things gardening has done for me is life lessons. And I write about this on my blog a lot, is just life lessons gardening can teach you. And gardening is a lot of work, but it gives back to you in so many ways. And, it gives back, beauty in your home, or, food on your table, and, just peace and happiness it can give you. It fills my heart. And so I just think anybody can do it at any age, from little toddlers to, elderly people. It's a wonderful thing for everyone. And that's why I encourage people, to garden, because there's so many benefits from it. And life lessons it's taught me is, moderation, patience. Number one, it's taught me patience, because I'm probably the most impatient person I've ever known. And just, being at peace, meditation, therapy, all these things, it's life in itself. And I can't encourage people more, enough to get out there and try it. And I believe anybody can do it. And I believe everybody can have a green thumb.
Sensational. Alex, you've been a brilliant guest. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Dave.